Welcome back, everyone. Well, Biden has done absolutely nothing to fix the fentanyl crisis. And aside from mentioning it at the State of the Union, we haven't heard much from him publicly about it either. Perhaps he doesn't realize that stopping the flow of fentanyl over our southern border was a campaign promise that he made. Unfortunately, as is the case with most politicians, he has failed to deliver since day one. On his campaign website that's still up, Beijing Biden promised to make fentanyl a top priority in our dealings with China. Yet in their latest rounds of talks, there was not even a single mention of it. So why am I not surprised here? Another promise was to enhance cooperation with Mexican authorities to disrupt the movement of heroin and fentanyl across the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, first of all, Mexico is beholden to the cartel. They can't be trusted. Their former security chief, Genaro Garcia Luna, was just found guilty today on all counts for taking cartel bribes that allowed El Chapo to escape and their drugs to flow freely to America. And even if we were to pretend they could be trusted, it's been no bueno for Biden so far on that front either. And you think it would be all but guaranteed to ensure federal agencies have the tools and the resources they need to stop the flow of fentanyl from abroad. Now, unfortunately, record low morale among agents indicates otherwise, resulting in 14 of them taking their lives just this year alone. That is the highest in more than a decade. Joining me now for more on this is former Director of Special Operations for the DEA, Derek Maltz. Derek, so glad to have you with us tonight. I wish it were under different circumstances. Every time we talk about the border, it's always in a negative light right now. And fentanyl has been one of the biggest crises resulting from this. It's in every state, every town. It's become the leading cause of death for American adults under Joe Biden's watch in 2021. Everything is pointing towards it being worse when we get the final tally for 2022. Do you expect this to worsen going forward?
Well, absolutely. Without the action, Jen, it's going to get worse. I mean, listen to the words of the drug czar from last week's Senate hearing. He said it's the worst drug crisis we've ever seen, unacceptable to me and the president, direct threat to public health and national security, new era of drug trafficking. Just think about that. I mean, it's unacceptable, but what are you doing? Why would you leave the border wide open if this is a big threat to national security? I mean, President Biden back in December said that the drug crisis is a very unusual and extraordinary threat to national security. But yet kids are dying all over America. Social media companies are facilitating the death and destruction of these kids. And the government is not even educating our communities and our kids. It's the army of families, Jen, that I work with, and I'm very proud. They put their grief into action. They run around the country. They educate schools. They put up billboards. They got all kinds of educational materials and nonprofits. But the government is absent. So the most basic stuff is not being done.
Yeah, and, we obviously had the State of the Union recently. Biden spoke about a number of topics, didn't spend much time on the border, but he did try to act like he would protect the border during that address. Listen to this.
Surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs.
Now, Derek, 28 years in the DEA, unfortunately, his plan isn't going to do much. On paper, the majority of fentanyl seized at ports of entry because a lot of it goes undetected between ports of entry. The latest example right here, U.S. Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz announced that one migrant alone was caught in the Yuma sector carrying 93 pounds of fentanyl. That's roughly 20% of all fentanyl seized between ports of entry since October 1st. Again, one migrant, 20% of all seizures in 5 months. Is this administration willfully blind?
Well, it's hard to imagine because Mayorkas understands, at least when he was working in DHS before, he understood the problem at the border. He understood the cartels. Now it's like he's just oblivious and he's lying to the American public. But look at the DEA seizures alone. Last year, Ann Milgram just identified that there were 57 million pills seized, 13,000 pounds. On top of that, the CBP seized over 14,000 pounds of fentanyl at the border, and everyone's declaring victory. But look at the death of the kids. The fastest growing death rate from fentanyl is kids under 14. And it's not the CDC that's putting out these warnings. It's the Families Against Fentanyl that have hired, analysts and researchers to look at CDC's data just to warn the public. It's absolutely disgusting. But right now, Jen, we have the cartels operating with impunity. But the scary part is they work very closely with the Chinese criminal networks. And now the Chinese are doing all the money laundering as well. They're picking up millions of dollars in America from the cartels, and they're laundering the money in sophisticated methods. The cartels get the money, they get the chemicals, the kids die, and the American public is allowing this to happen without putting the pressure on the politicians. Unacceptable.
Well, you know what? God bless those families that have lost someone as a result of this crisis, that are out there speaking out, spreading the word, because it doesn't seem that this administration is going to be taking any action, sadly, in the next 2 years. Derek Maltz, so grateful to have you and your expertise with us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. One last thing. Next week at Congress, they're having a hearing about the fentanyl madness, and its inaction is no longer acceptable.
We'll be keeping a close eye on that, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you.
And folks, synthetic opioids